Hello, everyone. My name is Julia. On behalf of Team Konekt, I would like to thank you for joining us today. You will be in a silent mode during the presentation to ensure the best experience for all. I encourage you to send the questions using the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen during the presentations as you have any questions. We reserve some time at the end of the webinar to address your questions. You can also use the chat function to say hi to everyone, to panelists and other participants. When using the chat, please keep in mind if you are sending your message to all participants or to all panelists, so you need to select your audience. We appreciate your feedback, and when the webinar ends, you will be asked to complete a survey. Once you complete the survey, you will receive a copy of today's presentation. This webinar is recorded and streamed live as well. Konekt campaign is organized by Una Buro, Phil, and Simplyk. We're three distinct companies, but we are united in our mission to help nonprofits succeed. The Konekt campaign was born because each of us work with numerous nonprofits on a daily basis, and we see firsthand that those that strive and those that struggle. We see that the tech tools of yesterday hurt nonprofits today. So the objective of Konekt is to raise awareness of awesome, powerful cloud technology that is available for nonprofits. I'm an expert in Salesforce space for nonprofit, the CRM space, and it often pains me to see how little organizations know about the technology that are available to you today, technology that is game-changing. Number two, we wanted to emphasize the success factors that are relevant in today's connected, mobile, and somewhat impatient world. So the world is now technology-driven, even more today than when we started to Konekt. And finally, our objective is to connect nonprofits, to share their knowledge, to share their expertise and learnings. The three of us uniting in Konekt is a great example how sharing and collaborating brings incredible results. And now I will ask the panelists to introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kim Fuller. I'm founder and CEO of Phil. And today I'm going to be talking to you guys about donor journey and audience segmentation. So my portion of the presentation is going to be more on the theoretical side. And then I'll be letting my colleagues, François and Julia, talk to you more about the how and the how-tos. So I'm really looking forward to spend this time with you. Hope you brought lots of snacks because we've got lots to cover this afternoon.
Hi, I'm François. I'm co-founder and CEO at Simplyk, so the fundraising suite for nonprofits. It will be more analytical, so how to leverage data to improve the donor experience. It will still be very, very simple, so something you can use right away today or this week.
There you go, I'm mute. And I'm Julia. I am a principal consultant and president at Una Buro. I am a CRM expert for nonprofits. So I will talk more about segmentation and how to use donor journey and the power of good data to craft memorable donor engagement journeys. Okay, and now I'll pass it over to Kim.
Julia. So before we dive into what a donor journey is, I want to address what really keeps us up at night. So hopefully I'll be able to move these slides forward. There we go. Oops, sorry about that. Well, let me go back. There we go. So let's look at why donors leave. Look through this list and identify the things you can and cannot control. There's a couple on here that for sure are beyond our reach. But if you look at it, a lot of the reasons that people are leaving your organization and going elsewhere is because they're not feeling the love, they're not understanding your mission enough, and they're seeing that other organizations are able to convince them that their money should go that way instead of your way. So what, with 6 out of these things that are within your control, You need to spend more time explaining to your donors why you need them, how you're using the money, staying in touch with them as often as possible, and thanking them genuinely and treating them like the lifeline of your organization, because that's what they are. You need to be able to show the impact that your organization is making and explain that every little amount counts. And if you start focusing on that, you'll really start seeing the results. So what I want to talk to you today about is the donor journey. And it's really about figuring out who your donors are, what they like, what they're going to do next. It's all factors that build into your success. And with digital marketing, where more and more of us are going today with our fundraising, you have database tools, you've got analytics. There's no more excuse for not keeping track. It may be more work at the onset, but the rewards are also greater. So this slide is incredibly intimidating, but it is an amazing snapshot. And it was put together by an organization called Cohort 3. And I wanted to share it with you today to really get an overview of what a donor journey looks like and what the different elements of it are, so that we can help you design one, which I'll explain shortly. So if we look at these layers, and I've numbered them 1 to 6, the first layer is audience segment. So you want to select your segments based on what you know, what you can find out, and how you can best group them. So if you take the example of captains of your peer-to-peer teams from your last bike-a-thon, they're not going to have the same motivation as the empty nester boomer shown in this example here. You can segment by demographic information or by program. It depends on your organization and your strategy. But I'm a big fan of doing the segmentation by program or service whenever possible versus demographics, because you can really focus in on the level of interest. So one of our organizations that we work with is the wonderful Geordie Theatre, and they have 3 distinct services where they do programming in schools, and they do a school tour. They also have a theater school, and they also give performances to families in the local Montreal area. So for us, segmenting by those 3 categories, as opposed to doing it by geographic or by age, we're able to really tap into what is of interest to the people who are already supporting us. So that's one way that you can do your audience segmentation. If we look at layers 2 to 4, this is the donor's point of view. So we're looking at their goals, their thoughts, emotions, and the actions that they're taking. What are they doing, thinking, and feeling as they progress through each stage of the giving process? And there's a few examples here where they can be intrigued, they might be confused, they might be delighted, they might be disappointed, and so on. So we need to see how they're interacting with us. Then on the 5th layer, it's really the promotions, the touch points. So the on and offline points of interaction, where the donor and the organization are meeting. So these touch points line up with the corresponding donor goals and actions and emotions for each stage. The touch points can be direct, like you can send an email to a donor, or they can be indirect. A donor might post something about your organization on their Facebook feed, for example. So it's usual that indirect touch points are a bit harder to identify during the journey mapping process, but they're really important to a modern day donor's experience. So we also have to be looking for those indirect touch points where the donors are off talking about our brand. On the 6th layer, we're looking at the giving stages. And so the important thing to keep in mind about a journey map is that it's a model for the donor experience, and a donor's real life sequencing and pace throughout the experience is going to be unique. So it may happen that You'll see a donor kind of zip through multiple stages at once, or they might loop back on a prior stage. They might skip a stage entirely. This is just really a model for the common journey and the main steps that the majority of your donors will experience. So it's not necessarily a one size fits all, but it's a really good starting point for creating the experience that we know will lead to greater donations. And I know what you're thinking. It's a lot of work, but we need to keep in mind that this is really about effort to outcome. If you put very little effort and time into cultivating your donors, you'll have very little to show for it, right? So that's why we even use the term cultivate when we refer to donors. It implies that we're nurturing and caring for the relationship. You just can't buy them off of a shelf like a bottle of ketchup. So let's look at the old ways, the old way of doing things, which was, to push out information to potential donors, hope that it struck a chord, and then pull them along until they'd make a donation, and then wait the appropriate amount of time before you'd ask again. And that was pretty much how we would work with a typical funnel approach. However, what we're seeing, what we're seeing now is a new, better way to engage donors is on a more personal level using a donor journey map. So we're going to be inspiring these donors or potential donors. You can think about two different approaches. If I said, our work changes lives, donate today. Or if I said, because of you, 1,000 young people are off the streets. Join us to bring the next 1,000 home. Who would you rather give to, right? You just know right there off the bat, the fact that I've used inspiring material and copywriting, it pulls you in, and that's what we want to do. We want to inspire them with meaningful stories that connect with people on an emotional level, and donors want to feel that they're a part of your work and that what they're giving to your organization really makes a difference. In terms of learn and engage, we want you to, when you're running ads or posts on social media, track every data point you can. It's super easy today in the digital space. Now we're doing a lot of digital events. Record who is coming to those. You need to figure out who's engaging with your organization, where the people are coming from, how old they are, where they live, anything else that will help inform their journey. And try to learn what's driving them to your website, for example. Where are they coming from? Are they hearing word of mouth? Are they coming through a Google search? If they're searching you out on Google, that's a really important thing to recognize, because they're looking for information, they're looking for support, and you can turn that into donation. And so meeting donors where they are is the best way to reach them, and making them come to you is destined to fail. And for those of you who've seen TED Talks, you'll know that when somebody's trying to put forward a point that's important, they repeat it twice. So that's what I'm going to do. Meeting donors where they are is the best way to reach them. Making them come to you is destined to fail. So then that brings us to the engagement portion, right? The word engage means to occupy, attract, involve someone's interest or attention. So we want to involve our donors, respond to their comments on social media, reply to their emails, return the phone calls, have those face-to-face meetings when it'll be safe again, invite them to participate in the things that your organization is doing so that you can include the donors in your work. And the more they feel that they're on the front lines, the more they'll become aligned with your mission. And it's not just a matter of pushing out a few newsletters every now and then. Donor engagement means that you have to build an actual relationship. And it may seem daunting when you have a huge list, but of that list, there are a few that you can start with that'll make all the difference. When it comes to asking for a donation, be direct. Ask for the donation, tell them what it's going to do to change lives. Use your donor profiles to personalize the ask by segment. So, think about it. Don't ask a millionaire for $50 and don't ask for $50 a month from a student. It doesn't make sense. So you want to meet them where they are and have it'll give you a better chance at getting the amount that you're looking for. In terms of showing your thanks and appreciation, obviously, as soon as the donation comes in, you have to thank them, but not just once and not just with that typical tax receipt in a very banal way. Get creative with thanking them and base it on your donors' personas. Again, if we go to those demographics and I look at a millennial, they're not going to pick up the phone if you try to call them and thank them. They'll probably want a text message or something cool instead. But an older person who's, especially right now during this moment of confinement, an older person, an older donor would love to hear from you. And you could mobilize your volunteers to call and thank your donors at this time in particular. So you want to demonstrate the impact by telling donors what you did with their money and who it helped. And that's really going to go a long way for the re-ask, because after some time has passed, you're going to want to ask them for another gift. We're always curious as to what the perfect timing is. But the more you know about your donors, the more you'll know when is the right time to ask. And basically, you can't go wrong if you just tell them what you've been up to since their last donation, and especially telling them what the additional donation will help you achieve. If you can make that a compelling argument, they will give again. But you have to be clear and you have to really back it up with data. And the secret sixth step, what it really isn't a secret, is that you got to go all through the cycle over and over again. You have to keep inspiring donors, and you have to keep, giving them some thoughtful, interesting content, keep studying their journey, figure out what you've learned to stay on top of it, and keep your donor communications fresh and re-ask with regularity. There's a famous quote that says, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So if you don't ask, you don't get. And for those of you who've worked with me before, you know I say that ad nauseum, but there's a reason for it. So I'm putting up this slide. I don't want to spend too much time on it because I want to get to the juicy part of the step-by-step. But since you'll have a copy of these slides after the presentation, feel free to come back to this and really look at the impact that these changes can make on your organization, and look at the way that you're doing things currently. Do you fit into the column on the left, or are you starting to adopt the actions on the right? Have discussions with your team and see how you can move from the old way of doing things to a newer way. So let's look at building the journey. How do you make this happen step by step? You're not expected to be an expert in everything. So if you need training or coaching to get started, you should know that there are professionals like us who can help you get there. And I'm hoping that the way that we've laid this out today will inspire you to give it a try. So Julia is shortly going to be talking to us about database and how important it is. And that's really the first place you want to start. Even if you're working in a simple Excel sheet or all the way up to fancy tools, you really need to start with your data and look at identifying and qualifying your prospects, and understanding your prospects and supporters is really the very, very first step. Segmenting and targeting. I always ask our clients, like, when was the last time you did a donor study? If you don't know what motivates your donor, how are you expected to know where to start? So you want to find out what kind of relationship the prospect or the donor has with your organization. That could be whether they volunteer regularly, or if they buy season tickets every year, or if they sit on your board of directors. That's going to help you rank the best prospects in your database, and whether they not already have a relationship with your organization. And then you can better understand your donors and your non-donors relationships with your organization. And once you have that information, you can target your efforts and turning that knowledge and creativity into some serious fundraising results. Here I want to really focus on improving the multi-channel marketing. So if you guys if you haven't really diversified your marketing yet, don't worry, there's still time. This is the perfect time to talk to your leadership team, get them around the table, and have a discussion about how you can really take advantage of all the digital tools that are out there. I know a lot of you are suffering from not being able to do face-to-face events, face-to-face fundraisers, but there's now more than ever the reason to reach out and adopt digital marketing and multi-channel marketing. So Look at why you're not doing it. Is it a question of resources? Is it silos? Figure out what's in your way so you can have an opportunity to really remove those barriers. And, you know, if you can't get your board of directors to agree to making an investment here, then make sure you try next quarter and build up some case studies, back it up with data, and get them on board, because it's really now is the time to do it. And there's funding available, and there's so much. If you don't get on that bandwagon, your competition will, and then you'll lose out. So why invest in online marketing strategies? Well, this is why. Donors acquired online are less loyal than those acquired through direct mail, but the donors who convert to offline giving after they make their initial gift online tend to maintain a higher than average giving level, with similar retention rates as those for traditional direct mail donors. So that is a really good reason to start with, you know, improving your digital presence, aside from the pandemic that we're living through right now. In terms of appreciation and retaining, we've covered this in, you know, in some previous webinars that we've done, but I really want to focus here on the customer experience. So it depends a lot on how your staff is handling the situation, and not enough organizations think about this. Marketers have known forever in the for-profit world how important it is, but there are many who struggle with it in the nonprofit world. And I want you to think about how much turnover we have. You know, how can you expect to keep donors long-term when the staff that is supposed to build the relationships with them doesn't last more than 20 months at a time in your organization? You need to invest in your people. And when you equip your staff with the skills and the tools and the decisions for the authority to serve your customers or your donors better, then your staff satisfaction goes up, your productivity is going to go up, and you're going to have greater value for your donors. So the same applies for volunteers. The better experience, the more loyal they'll be. And if you missed our last webinar, you can catch it on the recording on YouTube on Phil's channel, where we talk about how to keep your volunteers happy. Measuring. So Steve McLaughlin wrote that you stop counting, start measuring. Achieving this will help achieve meaningful outcomes. He says that we either get defensive or bored when it comes to measuring the results of our efforts and performance. And I understand that, because when I start asking questions when I'm working with a charity, they get a little defensive when I ask them to show me the numbers. And the more we embrace modern techniques, the easier it'll be to measure. So there's metrics for nonprofits' website, the email, online giving, advocacy, social media. Everything has so much rich and reliable set of metrics to measure from than traditional channels like direct mail. So if you think of like sites like kiva.org, they receive millions of dollars on online microloans and donations. And I know because I've given to them, and they connect with their donors directly to projects and outcomes right in the front and center. And so think about how you can show impact and measure, and you can check out our blog, Measure What Matters, for some inspiration. But you know, it's a culture shift. And so every strategic goal should have some measurable outcomes, and every personal goal should have clear outcomes that matter to the mission. So the trick is to be realistic and set the goals that are ambitious enough, but not so far out of reach that they're that they're discouraging. So that's it for my portion of this presentation. I want to encourage you to start small, get your feet wet. Don't try to do too much at once. Think about the resources you have in-house and whether you need to seek outside help. Find that help, get the training, grow your people, and you will be able to grow your organization. And I'll pass it off to François.
Hey, can you hear me? I'm so sorry. I'm full screen on your screen, Julia, so I couldn't start the microphone, but I think everyone can hear me now. If you can start my camera, that would be actually perfect. So thank you, Kim. Like in a TED Talk, I will repeat what you said, measure what matters, and only by measuring, you will actually be able to actually improve the key figures. So that's really what I will talk about, measuring and setting targets, and then looking at the data to actually reach those targets. So sorry about my haircut today. It's really messy. I definitely need to go out and go to the hairdresser sometime. So I'm François, I'm co-founder at Simplyk. I will talk about how to use data to improve the donor experience. And I'm actually really excited to talk about this because that's my work. So I spend so much time as a co-founder at Simplyk at looking at data to make sure that our donation forms convert. And I will share those techniques so that you can apply them to your website, to your all kind of donor experiences. So everything I will share, it's based on the data that we analyzed at Simplyk, so working with 3,000 charities and creating donation forms that actually convert 130 to 150% more than the average. So today, too often, that's the reaction of someone who wants to donate or someone who wants to participate to a fundraising event. Because it's often not optimized for sales fund, and that could be the same face in front of the laptop, like, wow, I don't get it and I want to donate. And we'll see at easy steps to have super happy donors. My illustrations are not as good as Phil's one. I'm pretty jealous. So here is how I'm going to present it. Find the friction, look at the data to get the causes, and then adapt the donor journey and enjoy the results. Before going into this, it might be overwhelming or look complicated, but I swear everything is super simple. Feel free to contact me after if you need help to do this at home. So first, if we want to look at a donor journey, we need to map it. So where do they come from? I think Kim shared a ton of super useful advices. So then at some point, they arrive to your donation page, and then you want to process. So they need to confirm their gift, or you have lost opportunities because they decided that at the end of the day, they didn't want to donate. And the bad news is that for many charities, that's what happens. So they do a ton of work to raise awareness, to explain what they do, how well they use the donation, but the donation page is not good enough. And so people go there, but only 10% confirm their donation. So today, even if my methodology can be applied as Kim said, to any part, you can always set up an output, a measurable output, and optimize it. Today, I will talk about optimizing your donor conversion rate. So what is it? The donor conversion rate is just comparing the number of donations to the number of unique visitors. So you will just see how many donations you received a month and compare it to how many visitors you had on the same month on your donation page. So I hope that makes sense. It's a basic percentage, and that's really what you want to optimize. So it's easy to say. So first, how do you measure your conversion rate? If that's not activated, you can easily activate Google Analytics. So Google Analytics is just the tool measuring your traffic. If you're not familiar with it, we can go through it later. It's super simple, and you will get your number of unique visitors. Then you go on your donation form, like Simplyk, Canada Helps, PayPal, and you check the number of donations and you calculate the ratio. And now I think that's the first, if there's only one thing to do today, that's it. It's like, because you will see if you're doing great or doing okay, and that's super simple. So now you have your conversion rate and you can measure it to industry average. If you're close to 9%, you're probably not doing everything perfect. If you're close to 15%, it's better. And if you do what I'm going to talk about, you can easily get to 23%, which is a Simplyk conversion rate, like general forms. So then you can optimize it even more, probably for another time, but you can optimize, do some A/B testing, explain more what you're going to do with the donation, because that is always the number one thing that increase donor conversion. So now you know if you're good or not compared to industry average, and you want to know what to do. So here I will suggest a few data to look at to optimize your donor experience. So on your donation form, how can you optimize your conversion rate? So 3 super important stuff: the number of clicks, making sure you are responsive, so checking the experience on a cell phone, and the languages. There are many more, but those are 3 really impactful and super simple to analyze. So first, the number of clicks. If your donation form looks like this, it means that it takes so many clicks to actually donate, because people need to choose the street type, the number of apartments, they need to enter their email 2 times. So that's a lot of clicks, and actually you can get to as little as 10 clicks. I wish I had more time and I could pause and say, guys, let's all go on our website and check how many clicks or how many interactions it takes to donate. So here are a few tricks. So look at the number of clicks and try to optimize it. And here are ways to optimize it. The key is smart defaults. It means that you choose something which is the default option, and if people have a different, they want to do it different, they change it. So a general donation form, 95% do one-time donation. So that's something you can have clicked by default. Same, here we are in Canada, most of your donors are in Canada, so why don't you choose it by default? And if you know your donors are all from Quebec or all from Ontario, you can also put it as a default. And then the address, so that should be as compact as possible, but smart defaults are super, super useful to reduce the number of clicks. And each click you add, well, each click you remove is more donation and more conversion rate. And then same on the conversion rate, keeping the part when you enter the credit card as simple as possible. It's the same, just that it's like 3 to 5% increase. I think that's from Stripe data, they see that those super short conversion form convert 10% more than industry average, because you just enter your card like straight up and no click, no changing window. So get the thing to have smart default. So it's something in your donation form, but also when you build your website, your donation page. So here you see Fondation Rea. The default is the credit card form, but if you want, you can do in memoriam donation, honorary donation, but they know that it's a small percentage. So they decide to bring everyone to the major option. And then if you want, you can choose something else. Same, 9% people prefer to donate by PayPal, whereas 60% prefer to donate by credit card. So the major options should always be credit card, but then you can add somewhere a button, hey, you can donate through PayPal if you prefer, or you can do an interact if you prefer. But the smart default, it allows you to streamline the process and keep it super simple. And that's okay. I said the only thing to do was to measure your donor conversion rate. That's the only thing to do. So those are data from Simplyk from last week. I don't know which day, but I just looked at the devices. And so I think today, just after the webinar, you can go to your Google Analytics and check what do people use when they go to your donation page. And it's probably close to 40%. So it's huge. It's huge and it's growing actually. So if your page looks like the one on the left, well, you have a problem because 40% of your donors have a super bad experience. So yeah, other things super impactful you can do is check those data. And once you check those, make sure you have a good experience and make sure you accept phone payments such as Google Pay or Apple Pay, because now it's almost 500 million people who have this installed on their phone. So if your donor can just click yes instead of keying their credit card, it will have a huge impact. Okay, I think I'm stuck on this one. And yeah, how can you, so let's say you're in front of your, so you can either go, if you want to check, you can either go on your website from your cell phone, but you can also do just right click and inspect. And you see on the bottom left, you have this icon with devices, and actually from your laptop, you can check the experience from a cell phone. It's like it will show a fake cell phone experience. You can also use Browser Stack. Browser Stack allows you to test your website with whatever you want. If you want to try the new iPhone 10 and on your laptop, it's super easy. And now it's fixed. You have a super good experience on your cell phone. Last thing, you can do a language analysis. So let's say most of your donors are speaking English. Well, it's okay. You have just an English form. If it's 50-50, well, obviously it's super important that you have bilingual forms, etc. So super fast to do so and really impactful. And last but not least, if you don't know, if you already have everything, great, and you still want to do better, you can record sessions with something called Hotjar. So Hotjar, it does a heat map of your website. You can see where people click a lot, what information they are looking for. And so it's super useful to understand how do people interact with your website. And so then, let's say you measured your conversion rate, you looked at the experience on cell phone, you reduced the number of clicks, and now you want to see the results. You don't have to get a ton of data to see important results. Just compare month over month your donation rate, and since it's a ratio, as long as you have a few hundred people, you will see the impact on your conversion rate. And hopefully you will soon get to 25 and 30%. I added a link to Optimizely about sample size, but if you do things with high impact, 100 donors, it's enough to see the difference before and after. I love talking about data, but I think that my time, it's Julia's time, and it will be super interesting too. Feel free to contact me if you have questions. We are at 23% conversion rate at Simplyk, and we are running new experiments to improve this. But that's because we have a few little clicks, good cell phone experience, and yeah, smart default, and you can all do this. Really enjoyed. Thank you, Sydney Robertson, for your message. And that's it about Simplyk. And Julia, I'm off. So Simplyk is a free fundraising suite. And yeah, enjoy Julia's presentation. It will be really, really interesting.
Thanks, François. As I mentioned before, I'm Julia. I am a nonprofit CRM expert at, let me go here. At Una Buro, we have done close to 100 nonprofit tech projects, and the devil is in the details. So where do we start, and how do we get there? We often think of, and François has mentioned it as well, the process is that we start looking at our data and then try to attempt to derive the meaning from what we see, what does the data, what kind of story it tells us, and then we try to make a decision on what to do. This might be a right process when you're trying to optimize your website, try to find the weaknesses of what the data is telling you and decide what you're going to do. But today, I'm going to propose you to think backward when it comes to creating a donor journey and segmentation. Organizing and collecting data sometimes without having a plan and a destination is silly, because you need to know where you're going first before start packing for the trip. So instead, what I propose you is to first determine where you want to get to. So you want to optimize your donor engagement. That's your goal. Is it to increase the number of your current donors from 10 to 50? Is it to raise 25% more this year than last year? Is it to build a suspect pool of legacy donors? Establish your destination first. When you know when you are going, and only then you can start planning how you're going to get there, your map. So the analysis comes second. In analysis stage, you will ask about questions such as, what is the gap that you're trying to close? In terms of donors, are you going to measure in terms of money? Both? What is your starting point? Who are the right donors to approach, and who are the wrong donors to approach in terms of where you're going to? What else do you need to know in order for you to reach your goal, to reach your destination? And know what you don't know and you won't know. Finally, only once you know where you want to go, acquire 40 new recurring donors, and you know where you're at. Let's say you're at 10 currently, and you have 0 donors in your suspect pool for recurrence. Only then you can ask the tools that you need to get to your goal, which is data. Often, even we fall into the trap of looking at our data first, trying to understand what is it telling us, and then make a plan. I'm a data geek, and I could spend hours cleaning it, collecting it, optimizing it, normalizing. It's often, to me, therapeutic because it's very easy and very calming. But way too often we collect data that we will rarely use. It's a waste of time, and it provides little additional value to where we're trying to get to. Because what I'm cleaning, optimizing, it's just for therapeutic purposes and not necessarily for to create that big impact that we often need. So do not fall into the trap of following the data. Instead, I propose you to have the data follow you, follow your strategy. I'm not going to spend much time on you setting your destination. I'm sure most of you already know where you're trying to get to. I hope your destination is measurable and vivid. So I'll jump right into the analysis part of crafting a donor journey. And the secret sauce, and Kim mentioned it, is the segmentation. But before we start, I would like to focus on something that is very important to keep in mind, which is the Pareto Principle. Many of you probably heard about it. It's also known as the 80-20 rule. In the philanthropy world, we can say that it also applies that 80% of the target comes from 20% of the donors. Furthermore, if we look at it even deeper, 80% of the funds comes from only 20% of your donors. 80% of all volunteer hours comes from 20% of our volunteers. In terms of sponsorship, 80% of the sponsorship money comes from 20% of your business relationships. And the last one, but the most important one, think about it. 80% of the results come from 20% of your time and effort. And if we flip it back, 80% of your effort brings only 20% of results. I'm going to follow Kim and François on this note. I'm going to repeat it again. 80% of the effort bring 20% of results, which is not smart. I'm a strong believer in delivering the value. The 80% value was 20% effort. So let's focus on that. When it comes to the following 20% that I'm going to talk about will help you to craft that impactful donor journeys. This brings us to a central point for the donor journeys is that if you target everyone, like Kim said, you are really targeting no one. If you are asking a student for a $100 donation and a millionaire for $50 donation, you'll probably lose both, because by that you're demonstrating that you really don't know who they are. This brings us to the central point of a donor profile. The analytics cannot go anywhere if you don't know who they are. I think Kim stressed that enough. François as well, know where they're coming from. This means the donor profile. Who are they? Not their first name and last name, but more. This means, like Kim has mentioned as well, understanding what are their interests, why do they give to your organization? How often they want to be solicited? Have you asked them? Have you done your donor study? Their given history. Students and millionaires here will be certainly separated and not be in the same category. When we look at such a thing as given history, it's really easy to get away. So keep it simple. Total gifts, last gift, average gifts, perhaps a couple more. Soft credit is something that is very interesting that I see many organizations don't track and miss. Donor story. I work with an organization that every time a donor calls, they ask them questions. They collect information and build their relationship. They know who their family is. They keep engaged, and slowly but surely each donor has their own story. And with that, they're able to craft the engagement strategy that is personalized to that particular donor profile. In Salesforce, our clients have tons of analytics on donors. Given history is rich, and this is just a fraction of what we're able to collect. Do we use all of this information, all this insight to craft our segments, to create our journey? Rarely. Just because you have lots of information, lots of stats, it does not mean you need them all. In fact, there's such a thing as too much data, too many stats, because it becomes overwhelming and you don't know what to focus on. Unless you have an army of analysts, there is such a thing, you don't need 20 metrics. Again, remember the 80-20 rule. Only 20% of the stats carry 80% of actionable insights. So less is more. Here's the 80% that I see used very often and can create an impact for your organization. This shows who is your donor, how much they give, the critical information. My favorite is always to segment and to understand what other roles a specific donor plays for your organizations. So we make sure to not put volunteers who are also donor in the same pool as the rest of our donors that we're prospecting. So once you have that information, it's very easy to segment. Kim previously mentioned that her favorite part is when we understand the services of organization they provide and use that as a link to our donors. I couldn't agree more. We see that collecting the donor primary appeal in this case, this donor is primary appeal is used because they would like to support youth activities within the organization. And we can use that simple segment in order to create different categories, different personas for our donor. For example, here is an example of segmentation by an appeal. We have few donors who don't necessarily have a certain interest, whereas other donors are interested in supporting youth activities, youth services and programming offered by the organization, whereas another group of donors prefer to talk about food security within your organization. With this kind of simple segmentation, when you create your donor journeys, you can craft the messaging and the plans that respond and appeal to their specific interests. As you guys probably saw, we have something that is called also levels. Levels is a basic segmentation. It's not only for pros, professional people to get this kind of information. Given levels basically ranges that segment your donors into their the given categories. So it's not very difficult to establish them, but by creating a range and assigning that level to a specific donor gives you an additional attribute how you can understand your donors and how you can craft, therefore, the engagement plans according to their donation level. So that brings us to journeys. Oops. Yeah, that brings us to journeys. By knowing who your donors are, you can qualify them for journeys. We can take donor a prospect on multiple journeys. The direction and path can change and can cross. When direction changes, so does the way you engage and steward them. The idea is that you move them along their journey, you keep them on the journey, whatever that journey is, as long as you know what is that journey of that donor, and not everybody follows the same path. Your engagement effort will also depend on their level. A potential bronze level annual given donor will have a completely different engagement plan than a donor who's on their journey to be a qualified platinum legacy donor. So the engagement plans will differ, not only depending on where they're going, but also on their level. Here's a quick example how we do it in Salesforce, but it doesn't have to be. A spreadsheet would also do the same, can have the same idea. What you have is a set of journey fields, whatever those journeys are correct for your organizations. You might not be going after the legacy donors, so that journey might not be necessary for your organization. But instead of journey fields with stages for each journey, you could be donor could be in a suspect pool for legacy giving and already qualified for a recurring journey. So by having different paths for each donor, you can manage them and steward them according to the path that they're on, and if they are on multiple paths. When you equip with this allows you to be equipped with right tools for the conversations at the right time. So now, if you're thinking, oh, Julia, this is way too much, it's a lot of effort. But remember, as we mentioned before, yes, cultivation is a process. But if you would like to hear the 20% of things that you can do to create maximum impact, the 80%, I have two things to propose to you today. Very often, a lot of organizations always go to the new potential donors and forget about the ones that you already have within your organization. A lot of organizations do not even have a conversation on defining who the active donors are, who are the lapsed, and who are inactive. Are the active donors those who haven't donated in the last 2 years, last 365 days to a specific key event? Do you have understanding and the definition of what are those categories for your organizations? Because if it's not defined, it's not measured. And if it's not measured, it's not managed. And if it's not managed, then there's nothing really to talk about of nurturing, and recovering those donors that are engaged with your organization. Second one that I would like to bring to your attention, the tool that you can use for segmentation, is the famous last year, but not unfortunately not this year report. This is a tool that many of fundraising professionals use to so-called as a your target list, and it is indeed. The common mistake here is that all the donors for gifts last year were greater than zero, but this year zero are bunched up in a single campaign, and we start like Kim was saying, sending them generic emails and trying to engage them. What I propose is a simple tool to separate that pool of donors that you're trying to re-engage into, yes, levels again, and go after those that provide the maximum impact for your organizations. Remember, there is only 20% of donors that give you 80% of the fundraising of the funds that you raise. So now that we know where you're going to, like we said, increase your recurring donors and put them on their recurring journey path. You know that you're going to need to increase by 40. And you know how you're going to get there. You're going to get there by crafting the journey, understanding the donor profiles, qualifying existing donors, and perhaps looking for new prospect donors. So let's talk about what you need in order to get there. And what you need is good data. But what is good data? Well, for me, trying to keep it simple, first and foremost thing is completeness, meaning the characteristics you need are captured in donor profiles. Things like given history, appeal must be completed for each donor. What we also often see in a lot of organizations that people collect information they never use, and that impacts the information that we do need to collect. Often I see organizations with 200 fields, that different stats they're trying to collect for their donors, whereas we don't know their interests because people within the organization spend too much time collecting other things. So focus on what really matters. Less is more. One of the uniformity to help with this aspect, use pick lists. You will be surprised how many times Montreal can be, in how many different ways Montreal can be spelled. When we have data that is not uniform, it is very difficult to have any kind of analytics, because in this case, there will be 3 different regions, whereas it is actually 1. Duplicates, like cleaning your house, it is maintenance. There's no magic solution here. It is diligence and continual review. There should be only 1 master record for that contact, for that organization. Otherwise, again, your analytics and your reports will be off. So, and why do we do this? Well, I guess it's obvious, but whenever you can have the most state-of-the-art CRM system like Salesforce, but if you put the garbage, bad data to any system, to any model, your results will be also unreliable, and we will not trust our data. And when we have unreliable data, it doesn't matter what journeys we're on, doesn't matter what kind of analytics we run, we would not be able to get to where we want to get. So again, to summarize, remember where you are going. Start from your destination. How are you going to get there? What kind of questions you need to answer, and then decide on the tools, on the data that in order to get to that information. And keeping it simple. Keeping it simple is very important. There's so many things you could be doing. Focus on the what's most important, And I know that every day we are busy with our day-to-day activities or administrative tasks, and it's not easy to find the time to think about how to get organized, how to create those journeys, how to segment, how to clean your data. But what we can do is to start, putting those thoughts into the action. And the tip is start small, start somewhere. It's a long journey, and what's most important is to get on that journey. In conclusion, just a quick word about Una Buro. We help nonprofits to implement tools and manage donors and other processes. No, you don't have to be a big organization to have a world-leading CRM in your organization. In fact, we specialize in cloud tech for small and medium nonprofits with help organizations that run entirely on volunteers with no full-time staff. And today, cloud technology is relevant more than ever, and it is our goal to bring technology to nonprofits. And with that, I'll pass it over back to Kim for closing remarks.
Thanks, Julia. That was really cool. I love how those three came together, the three presentations. What stood out for me with François' presentation is that he gave us some really good tips, and you can use those tips once you've had a chance to take a look at your website. And if you see that you're having problems with your mobile presence or that your copywriting is off, these are all good arguments that you can use to take to your leadership team, to take to the board and say, guys, we need a budget. We need to work on this, because otherwise we're just, wasting our time trying to bring in all of these donors and not having them convert. So for me, that lesson on conversion was a really, really valuable takeaway. And the 80-20 rules, there are so many of them that Julia spoke to us about. And I think that, she and I both touched on the fact that cultivation is a process, and it takes time, and it really has to be meaningful. And if we're not putting in the time, we're certainly not going to get the results. And one thing that struck me as interesting was the fact that when she spoke about the taking care of your active donors, one of the things that we realize that when charities come to us and they say, oh, we need an acquisition plan, we need new donors. And my first question is always, well, how are you taking care of your current ones? And so I think it's really important to focus on nurturing your current donors before you even venture out to acquire new ones, because you will get more results from the people who have already shown you some love in the past. So we hope you found that interesting and useful. There's also some great opportunities right now with funding. It takes money to make money, as they say in the business. So we've provided a few links here. If you want to get in on the PACME funding for the province of Quebec, you better hurry, because we're getting rumors that a lot of the money is already being spent. So make sure you get your application in there. There's training opportunities for your team that could be really valuable, that can be used for any of our services. And there's a bunch of emergency funds as well that we've put a few links in there. So what we're going to do now is, thanks to Mitchell